Hi, my name is Brianna, and this is my presentation on the book, The Group, 7 Widowed Fathers Reimagine Life. The book, The Group, 7 Widowed Fathers Reimagine Life was written by Donald L. Rosenstein and Justin M. Yop. The book is divided into 3 parts: Unimaginable Loss, Adaptation, and Reimagined Lives. In Part 1, Unimaginable Loss, the book describes in detail the struggles that widowed fathers face. The group starts by the fathers describing their loss and the grief that they have experienced due to the loss of their wives. Both the group members and the facilitators do not have much experience with a group of this nature, and the group transforms as the facilitators and participants learn the support that they require through the group. The group was originally thought to be a 6-session group, but turns into a monthly group meeting that runs for 3 years. The men specifically describe their struggles with parenting alone, the guilt and lack of confidence in their parenting skills. The book then describes grief versus depression. The book discusses the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. In Part 2, Adaptation, the book focuses on the role of the group members as fathers and how they adapt while supporting the grief of their children. They explore the concept of a good enough father and eventually grasp the idea of not being a perfect parent, but a good enough parent. The men then discuss the topic of their wedding rings and if and when they should take them off. The rings symbolize so much for the men and their past with their wives. They struggle with the ambivalence of taking the rings off, but eventually they all take them off. The men then discuss dating and the anxiety surrounded by dating again. One group member eventually gets remarried and exits the group. In Part 3, Reimagined Lives, it discusses more future-oriented topics, such as what the future looks like for the men. They discuss the idea of remarrying and how that will affect their children. They discuss what they gained from the group, including strengths, post-traumatic growth, resiliency, and the meaning of life. The men then help the facilitators in research developing future groups. The group then helped to create a support website, widowparents.org, and the book, The Group. The book then discusses terminating the group and when they feel they should terminate. They discuss it once the men do not feel that they want to terminate. They discuss it once and then the men do not feel that they want to terminate yet. They then come back around to the topic and the men feel that they have come to a place that they are satisfied with their parenting skills and their current and future relationships. The men feel that they can terminate and would still assist the researchers if they needed anything in the future. Key clinical realizations. Grief versus depression. The book discusses grief versus depression in detail. The author discusses the findings of Dr. Elizabeth Ross and review the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The book then discusses grief versus clinical depression in the DSM and how clinicians can determine if their clients are experiencing grief or depression. The group discusses the 5 stages and how they don't always experience the stages in order, how some skip the stages or often get stuck in certain stages for longer than expected. As a leader of the group, it is important to understand that individuals do not experience things in the same way, and there is no linear or right way to grieve. It is important to have that discussion with your participants and let them know that it's normal to not experience those stages in certain orders or the same as someone else. The second realization is flexibility. Originally, the facilitators wanted the group to be educational with a lecture and then open theme to each group's session. The group was to be 6 sessions monthly and then terminate after the 6th session. The facilitators quickly realized that the members of the group needed a different structure and 6 sessions would not be sufficient for them in their healing. The group met for 3 years, once a month, before finally terminating the group. I believe that clinicians need to understand that not every group dynamic is the same. This group needed 3 years, but a future group may not and may be fine with terminating after 6 sessions. It is important to be flexible with groups to meet the needs of the different personalities, and oftentimes you will allow certain people to enter even if they do not meet specific criteria. So facilitators need to be flexible, but also discuss with the group what they need and meet the needs of their group better by customizing the group to the dynamic. The third realization is post-traumatic growth. After experiencing something traumatic, it is important for individuals to find something that keeps them going and encouraged. Throughout the book, the men had to focus on learning the role of being a single parent. Their children's needs helped the men to not focus so much on the loss of their wives. It helped them to learn a routine and get back to their day-to-day lives. It is important for group facilitators to help members find their reason in life to keep going and what motivates them in order to help with the post-traumatic growth. The men in the book found that being good fathers to their children and meeting the needs of their children helped them to not dwell on the past and the loss of their wives. Key observations. The first observation is the initial sessions and building rapport between the clients and the facilitators. One thing I noticed in the book is that the group started with each participant speaking about his experience and the loss he has experienced. While I think that it is important for participants to eventually speak about their situation and participate in group, it is not necessary at the first meeting. People can be uncomfortable being vulnerable in front of others and not necessarily want to speak at the first few meetings. I think that it is important for facilitators to let the participants know that they do not have to speak or share right away, but they can if they would like to. I also think it is important for the facilitators to have an icebreaker or something lighthearted to allow the members to build rapport with each other and with the facilitators and to learn more about each other before opening up and becoming vulnerable. The second key observation is future relationships. Another observation was what the future looked like for the men. There was a great emphasis on no longer wearing their wedding rings and what dating would look like and when the right time to move on is. They discussed how the men had terrible first dates and one man even had a health scare with someone he was dating. He stated that while she recovered, all he could think about was how he could not be a caregiver again and eventually ended the relationship. I think that it is important for group members to discuss and share their opinions on moving on to future relationships, how their children feel, and how their new partners feel. I think hearing it from someone with a shared experience can help others to not feel guilty about moving forward. Hearing from a facilitator that it is okay to move on without the experience of the full dynamic may not be enough for participants, but hearing their peers' experiences can help them feel less shame and guilt around the topic. The third observation was termination. The group and the facilitators had difficulty knowing when to terminate the sessions of the group. The topic came up on multiple occasions, but members would come up with reasons as to why they did not want to end the group. One member was able to terminate his role kind of organically in the group due to getting married and moving out of state, but the others had difficulty knowing when the right time was. Finally, as participation started to dwindle and participants were feeling more successful in their parenting skills and newfound relationships, the sessions were ended after 3 years. I believe facilitators need to have the discussion of termination at the beginning of the group. This allows for the group participants to understand the expectations and not become dependent on the group. It is important for facilitators to emphasize self-determination and focus on the strengths of the participants. That way they can help themselves in and outside of the group. This will make the termination of the group more positive and easier rather than a negative and somber experience for them. The theme throughout the book that stood out to me was being a good enough parent. The men often thought to themselves, am I good enough? And they were very hard on themselves initially because they were trying to be perfect parents and live up to the way their wives ran things in the home and also societal expectations of parenting. However, they were doing it alone. They were taking on both the role of mother and father, and there was no way that they could be a perfect parent. Once they encompassed that good enough is perfect, then the men started to really embrace this theme and take some pressure off of themselves and their parenting. The men shared their downfalls and successes as single parents throughout the group. And I believe that sharing their stories with each other helped them to understand that no one is perfect, and they had sort of a solidarity in struggling through being a single parent and a widowed father. I think facilitators need to empower their participants, focus on their strengths, and help them to understand that people go through processes at their own pace. There's no one-size-fits-all to processing trauma and loss or even parenting. The facilitators can help the participants to achieve their goals, even if they are achieved at different times from others. And they can help them feel that they are good enough as parents, and good enough is often perfect. And they have been good fathers. A theme that I would address in a group is survivor guilt. In the book, it was addressed that some of the members felt that the wrong parent had died, that it should have been them and their children would be better off if they died over their mother. Survivor guilt can be applied to many different situations, such as drug overdoses, accidents, natural deaths, war, many different things. I think that it is important for facilitators to focus on the strengths that the surviving individuals have and what they contribute to others' lives. The situation that they are in is not something that they control, and they can't take it back or bring back the deceased individual. So by shifting the focus off of what if, they can focus on what the survivor can do for others and how valuable they are as a person. The individual can start to see themselves as being valuable and start to rid themselves of the guilt associated to surviving over the deceased individual.